Welcome to History 338, History of Japan, Week 1, Part 2. We begin with the story of a dog. This dog was of a Japanese breed. He actually was an Aikido dog, Inu dog, from Aikido Prefecture. Born in 1923, and his name was Hachiko. Hachi meaning 8, and Ko meaning little prince. So he was the 8th born in his litter of puppies, 8th little prince. And his owner was a professor of agriculture at the University of Tokyo called Hidesaburo Ueno. And Professor Ueno would go to the university every day, and he'd return. And greeting him upon his return every day at Shibuya Station on the commuter train there at the station would be Hachiko. Well, in May of 1925, Professor Ueno died while at the university of a cerebral hemorrhage. So he never returned that day, sadly, to the train station to go home and to greet little Hachiko. Hachiko, however, continued long after the professor's death in 1925 to return each day to the station at about the time that his owner would have returned to greet him, and of course the owner was dead. And this kind of loyalty was celebrated in films and children's books, and in fact there's Hachiko on the left. A bronze statue of Hachiko was erected at Shibuya Station in Tokyo. It was scrapped during World War II for the metal, and then after the war a new one was erected, and you can still see at Shibuya Station the statue of Hachiko today. Hachiko stands as a symbol of the Japanese sense of loyalty and of group consensus. So in Lecture 1, Part 1, our introductory lecture, we talked about how nations sometimes differ on this scale or spectrum of individualism versus collectivism, or what we might also refer to as group consensus. Japan is highly collectivistic in its society, and that is, it relies a lot upon a group consensus. We could ask the question, is this group consensus related to Confucianism, which we will be studying in this class? And if so, how deep is it? Where does the truth really lie? What is the depth and breadth of this collectivism, of this group consciousness and consensus? Digging deeper, we could really ask 3 questions, and we will examine these 3 questions in our readings, in our lectures, in our assignments. And the first of those is, how have the Japanese viewed their own culture, politics, and economy? How have Westerners, secondarily, and number 2, how have Westerners viewed the Japanese? And 3, how have the Japanese viewed Westerners? And by looking at these 3 questions, we can sort of delve into that larger question of the group consensus and identity. Stereotypes really complicate things even more. And if you get time, you can enjoy Season 10, Episode 23 of The Simpsons, which was entitled 30 Minutes Over Tokyo, and which contains a lot of stereotypes of both Japanese and of Americans in this episode. We could look at things statistically in terms of data. For instance, the most recent data in terms of income inequality between Japan and the United States. And as you've seen, I color-coded some of the bars on this graph. This shows that Germany has less income inequality, so it has more equality, much more equality than even Japan, and much more Japan has than the United States. So what does that say when a society believes that having more equal income and treating people in a fair way, how does that tie into this whole sense of the importance of the group and group identity? Another thing is that we might want to look at is that this statistic, this is the latest one I could find as of March 2011, showed there were some 30,516 attorneys registered with the Japan Bar Association. That would be one lawyer in Japan for every 4,119 people. By comparison, the American Bar Association claimed over 1.2 million active attorneys, which would be one lawyer for every 250 people. Why is it that the Japanese are much less litigious, much less likely to file suit, etc., against one another? And why are things so much safer in Japan than in the US in terms of the crime rate, especially in terms of the murder rate? So if we look at things like violent crime, we can see that in terms of gun crime, Japan ranked 158th among nations. The United States ranked first. So in terms of the possibility of being murdered, you're 148 times more likely to be murdered in the United States than in Japan. So we can look at a number of different indicators and see that Japan overall, and some of you who have studied in Japan or visited Japan or know of people who have done, who have visited or studied in Japan, know that it is a much safer country than the United States and other developed countries. And part of that is due undoubtedly to the group consensus and this sense of group identity. Well, we actually are going to begin this class sort of backwards. Instead of looking at ancient history first, we want to get at this whole idea of group consensus. So we want to start more recently with the book by T.R. Reid, a journalist, who moved his family to Japan to head up the Tokyo Bureau of the Washington Post. And he wrote a book entitled Confucius Lives Next Door. It's a captivating book. You won't be able to put it down. An easy read. You can easily sit down and read it in a couple of hours. You may not even want to put it down for a break. It introduces you to important differences between Japan and the U.S. The subtitle perhaps states it all by saying, what living in the East teaches us about living in the West. And think about the title itself. Confucius lives next door. Who is his next door neighbor? Why does he seem like Confucius to T.R. Reid and his family? Any questions? Please feel free to email or phone me. I'm always happy to help, and have a great week.